Elias Crowder had lived 40 years on the rust-colored plains of Arizona, and in all those years he had never broken a promise, not to man, not to God, and not even to the land he worked with his trembling, over-calloused hands. He was a quiet farmer, the kind who spoke more to his soil than his neighbors. But he carried a gentleness that people noticed even if they never mentioned it aloud. One blistering afternoon, while hauling dried bundles of corn from his failing field, he saw movement near the tree line. A tiny figure, weak, unsteady, and trying not to be seen. An Apache child, ribs showing, hair tangled by wind and hunger, stared at him with wide, dark eyes that held both fear and desperate need. Elias did not hesitate. He slowly set down the corn, lifted both hands to show no threat, and said softly, "You look hungry, son." The boy didn't reply, just swayed on his feet. And something inside Elias, something older than fear, older than the long history between settlers and the Apache, snapped wide open. He brought the child inside, fed him bread, stew, and sweetened water until the boy finally whispered his name, Nantan. Elias learned the child had wandered from a starving band of Apache families deep in the hills. Storms had taken their food. Soldiers had pushed them farther from the rivers. Winter had come early, cruel and merciless. Before the boy left, Elias placed a hand on his thin shoulder and promised that he would bring more food. Enough for him and his people. Neighbors begged him not to. "Apache don't forget," they warned. "Sometimes kindness brings arrows." But Elias couldn't forget the hollow eyes of that starving boy. The next dawn he loaded his wagon with sacks of cornmeal, dried beans, smoked meat, and water barrels, the very supplies he himself needed to survive the coming month. But a promise was a promise. He rode into the rugged canyons where only desperation or death drove most men. When he finally reached the hidden camp, a dozen Apache warriors appeared from behind boulders, bows raised, faces painted with exhaustion more than hostility. Elias raised his hands and stepped off the wagon. He said only 6 words, "I kept my promise to Nantan." Silence fell. Then the boy appeared from behind a hut, running to him with joy so raw that even the warriors lowered their weapons a fraction. Elias unloaded the food himself, refusing help, insisting it was given freely, not as payment, not as trade, not as penance. The tribe watched him, first with suspicion, then curiosity, then something almost like reverence. Their chief, a stern elder named Redtail, approached him and placed a weathered hand on Elias's chest. "White farmers break words," the chief said quietly. "But you are not like them." Elias only smiled. A promise is a promise. What he didn't know then was that the act of feeding one child would become the ember that lit a fire far bigger than he ever imagined, for kindness, when given in the darkest moments, does not return as a small spark, it returns as a roaring sunrise, with the power to change everything. And the Apache were not a people who forgot. They were a people who remembered with their hearts, their honor, and their blood. As Elias rode home, unaware of the eyes following him from cliffs and ridgelines, the tribe gathered quietly. They didn't speak of revenge, fear, or old wounds. They spoke of gratitude. They spoke of repaying a debt. They spoke of feeding a man's entire town the way he had fed their child. And in the wind curling through the canyon, Redtail whispered, "The farmer kept his word. Now we will keep ours." 3 weeks later, the town of Red Mesa woke to a sound no one had heard since their grandparents' time, the rhythmic thunder of many horses moving as one. People stepped out of their homes half-dressed, bleary-eyed, expecting trouble or soldiers or raiders. But what they saw froze them completely. An entire Apache caravan rolling silently through the dust, stretching farther than any of them could count. Warriors rode at the front, but they held no weapons in their hands, only bundles, baskets, sacks, and crates. Behind them walked Apache women carrying dried meat, vegetables, woven bags of cornmeal, and great clay pots sealed with fat and herbs. Children herded goats and brought crates of fruit gathered from hidden groves. It was as if the tribe had emptied their entire world and brought it here. The townsfolk panicked at first. Doors slammed. Rifles appeared in shaking hands, but the Apache kept coming peacefully, never breaking formation, never raising a war cry. When they finally reached the town square, Redtail himself dismounted and waited. Elias, hearing the commotion, rushed from his farmhouse faster than his old knees should have allowed. The moment he saw the chief, he understood. The chief touched his chest the same way. Elias had touched Nantan's shoulder, simple, firm, filled with meaning. "You fed one child," Redtail said. "We feed all your people." Before Elias could respond, the Apache began unloading supplies, mountains of them, stacking baskets of corn, dried squash, smoked venison, wild berries, healing herbs, blankets, pottery, and water. Townspeople stared, speechless as the square filled with more food than Red Mesa had seen during the harshest droughts and leanest winters. Children gathered around the Apache kids, giggling shyly. Women approached the Apache women with cautious but respectful curiosity, and even the men who had once muttered warnings about savages lowered their weapons and helped distribute supplies. For one surreal moment, the tension between two worlds cracked open, and kindness poured through like sunlight. The mayor approached Elias trembling. "Why would they do this?" he whispered. Elias simply replied, "Because promises matter." Redtail then addressed the entire town, speaking in a deep voice that carried across rooftops. "A man who keeps his word is worth 10 men who do. Not, this farmer gave when he had little. Now we give when we have little. This is how honor works." Slowly, applause rippled across the square from one person, then another, until the whole town erupted in clapping, cheering, some even wiping their eyes. For the first time in decades, Apache and settlers stood side by side, not as enemies, but as neighbors. That night, a great feast was held beneath lanterns and stars. Apache drummers played, townsfolk danced. Children shared stories with children, and Red Mesa felt alive in a way no one had ever felt before. Elias sat at the center of it all, humbled, heart full, knowing this moment, this impossible moment, was born from a single act of compassion. As the fire crackled and laughter rose into the night sky, Redtail sat beside him and said, "You changed more than one life, farmer. You changed the path of two peoples." And Elias, staring at the mingling of cultures that had once lived as strangers, whispered, "No, we changed it together." As the feast continued long into the night, Red Mesa learned something the world often forgets. One act of kindness can echo across entire nations. And if you felt even a spark of inspiration from this story, if it touched your heart or painted a picture in your imagination, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more stories like this are waiting to rise, just like the dawn over these old western lands.